The thunder of cannon fire echoed across the Caribbean as a small merchant vessel frantically tried to flee. But the black flag rising on the horizon meant only one thing: pirates. And leading this particular onslaught were not the usual bearded cutthroats, but two women whose names would strike terror across the sea lanes, and Bonny and Mary Read, known as among the most fearsome pirates of the early 18th century. Active during what historians define as the Golden Age of Piracy circa 1650 to 1730, Bonny and Read defied every social norm of their era. Unlike the legends of fictional pirate queens, these women were real, armed, and utterly ruthless. Operating primarily in the West Indies, particularly near New Providence in the Bahamas, they sailed aboard the pirate sloop Revenge under the command of the infamous Calico Jack Rackham, but many contemporary accounts suggest it was Bonny and Read who inspired far more fear among their victims. According to Captain Charles Johnson's A General History of the Pirates 1724, a key contemporary source, both women dressed as men during combat, but made no attempt to conceal their identity when asserting authority. Johnson noted that they were as active and ready to board or undertake anything that was hazardous, and that captured crews were often stunned to discover they had been overwhelmed by women wielding cutlasses and pistols with unflinching brutality. They did not merely accompany male pirates. They fought, captured, and punished just as harshly. Sailors who resisted were often cut down on deck, and captives taken were subjected to forced labor, confinement, or worse. Chained in below-deck prisons. Dim lantern light flickered across the damp timber walls of the hold. The stench of salt, sweat, and rot hung heavy in the air. Shackled by iron cuffs, captives taken by pirates often found themselves confined in the darkest recesses of the ship, the prison hold, a space barely fit for cargo, let alone human life. Among the crews of the Caribbean, pirates like Bonny and Mary Read were known not only for their ferocity in battle, but for their equal participation in the capture and containment of prisoners. Historical records, including court depositions from captured pirates, confirm that prisoners, whether captured sailors, merchants, or informers, were routinely chained below deck, often for days or weeks without release. The purpose of these below-deck confinements varied. Some captives were held for ransom, particularly if they were wealthy merchants or officers. Others were kept as forced labor, compelled to repair sails, pump water, or cook for the crew under threat of violence. Many were simply kept alive until pirates could determine their value, or until the next port where they might be sold or exchanged. Conditions in these makeshift prisons were harsh by any standard. Most pirate ships lacked formal brig structures, so prisoners were often shackled to beams or bulkheads, forced to lie in their own filth, enduring heat, vermin, and thirst. In one Royal Navy account describing the Revenge, the pirate sloop used by Calico Jack, survivors testified that prisoners were chained in pairs, fed little, and rarely brought above deck. These below-deck prisons were not merely holding cells, they were a tool of terror, a deliberate message to anyone who might consider resisting a pirate attack. Survival would come at a cost. Marooning abandoned on a desert island to die. The rowboat scraped against the shore of a barren cay somewhere in the Bahamian archipelago. Behind it, the pirate's ship drifted at anchor just long enough for its crew to unload a few casks of water and a small portion of food. Then, without another word, the boat pushed off, leaving its prisoners stranded, marooned, the most feared punishment in the age of piracy. Marooning was not a pirate legend but a documented practice rooted in maritime custom. In the 17th and early 18th centuries, Caribbean pirates, including crews that Bonny and Mary Read sailed with, used this method to punish mutineers, informants, or captured sailors they deemed too dangerous or useless to keep aboard. The term comes from the Spanish cimarron, meaning wild or untamed, originally applied to escaped enslaved people. By the time of the Golden Age of Piracy, it had become synonymous with abandonment on an uninhabited island. Surviving marooning was rare. Those cast off were typically left with a small supply of gunpowder, shot, and a pistol, sometimes as a grim courtesy for self-defense or suicide. Most cays and islets in the West Indies lacked fresh water, shade, or edible plants, and marooned individuals frequently perished from dehydration, starvation, or exposure within days. Pirates understood this and used marooning as both a disciplinary measure and a public spectacle of power. Historical evidence ties marooning directly to crews like Calico Jacks. Captain Charles Johnson's A General History of the Pirates records multiple cases where pirates, including some in Nassau and New Providence, set them ashore on a small island with 1 bottle of powder, 1 bottle of water, and 1 pistol. This was not merely punishment but psychological warfare, a warning to others aboard. Bonny and Read, whose reputations for severity matched their male counterparts, would have been active participants in such decisions, enforcing the code of fear that sustained pirate discipline. To be marooned was to be erased, out of sight, out of life, left with only the horizon and the slow certainty of death. In the brutal logic of the pirate world, it was the ultimate demonstration that loyalty was the only true currency at sea. The whipping post punishment on the high seas. The prisoner's shirt was ripped from his back. Ropes tied his arms to the mainmast, and the crew gathered in grim silence. A cat o' nine tails, a whip with multiple knotted cords used for punishment, was raised, then brought down with punishing force. On pirate ships, discipline was maintained through pain, and the whipping post stood as the most visible symbol of that authority. Whipping was not unique to pirates, it was standard punishment across naval vessels in the 17th and 18th centuries. But aboard pirate ships, it took on a sharper edge. Without formal courts or governing law, pirates enforced their own code, the Articles of Agreement, often signed by all crew. Violating these rules, whether by stealing from fellow pirates, disobeying orders, or showing cowardice in battle, could mean severe flogging. For pirates like in Bonny and Mary Read, whose presence was anything but symbolic, such punishments were not hidden. Contemporary sources describe their active roles during combat, and by extension, it is historically consistent that they also participated in enforcing discipline. While no trial records state they themselves administered floggings, pirate crews operated on collective enforcement. All ranks, regardless of gender, could demand punishment for violations. Bonny in particular was noted for her violent temperament, once reportedly threatening to shoot male crewmates who refused to fight. Aboard pirate ships like the Revenge, floggings served both punishment and performance. The sounds of the lash, the cries of the punished, and the presence of armed crew members ensured obedience through fear. The cat o' nine tails, sometimes soaked in brine to intensify the pain and infection, left lasting scars, both physical and psychological. Floggings could number from a dozen to several dozen lashes, depending on the offense and the mood of the crew. To defy the code was to offer your back to the mast. The whipping post was more than a place of pain, it was the foundation of pirate order, reminding every soul aboard that freedom under the black flag came with brutal consequence. Beneath the black flag, women like in Bonny and Mary Read proved that terror at sea knew no gender. Their actions, violent, methodical, and unflinching, shattered the conventions of their time and revealed a darker truth, that in lawless waters, power was claimed not by birth or title, but by brutality, fear, and iron resolve. The legacy of these female pirates forces us to confront a truth that history rarely asks aloud. When the oppressed become the enforcers, what does justice truly mean? As Captain Charles Johnson recorded in 1724, describing in Bonny's fury at her crew's surrender, "If you had fought like men, you need not have been hanged like dogs." That voice still echoes, less a cry of defiance than a grim reminder of who ruled the sea when law fell silent.